Hey there, welcome to Deeply Rooted. I'm Jeremiah Reiner, your host. Thank you guys for listening. This is episode 104, and we're actually recording live for us, but it'll be audio for you guys. But we're here at a church in Big Stone Gap, Virginia that you're probably familiar with. We've had our pastor friend on here, Josh Tompkins, many times before at West End Baptist Church, but we're here again. We appreciate these folks for allowing us to use their facility. But I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a moment, but don't forget, if you haven't done so before, go on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button. And you can also follow us as well on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review on there as well. That will help us out greatly in getting the word out. And also share it with other people. That also benefits what we're doing here at the Deeply Rooted Ministry. Find us on our Facebook group page and head on over to our website at deeplyrootedpodcast.com. You'll find the archived episodes. That'll link you up to our YouTube channel. And you can also find our blog post that we've got on there and upcoming ministry schedule as well. So that being said and out of the way, I'm going to introduce our guest this time for episode 104. This is Skye Waddle. Skye's a resident of Big Stone Gap, Virginia. She works at Rachel's Haven in Pound, Virginia. She's a resident technician there and house coordinator. She's a faithful member here at West End Baptist Church, and she also contributes regularly in her ministry with her writings and her blog posts. So Skye, welcome to Deeply Rooted.
Well, thank you for having me on here.
I'm going to start off because we talked about this right before we got going. You're a Gate City native.
Yes.
Which puts you in elite company with yours truly here. And I've got one major Gate City question to really find out where you stand. But what's your typical PALS order when you go through?
Oh, I get a big pile of cheese, no mayo, add mustard, French fry, and a peachy tea.
There we go. Peachy tea. That's what I was wanting to hear. So she checks off all the boxes, so she's a proud Gate City native. But I want to start with your background because, again, you mentioned growing up in Gate City. Tell us a little bit about your home life growing up there and how you guys sort of navigated life in the big city of Gate City.
Well, I lived in Weber City and went to Gate City.
Okay.
My dad was in the Navy when I was born. My mom and dad got divorced when I was fairly young, 5, 6 years old. And then we moved to where my grandmother was, my dad's mom. And my grandmother's the one that raised me. My dad had custody of me and my brother. And Dad raised me a little bit, but I lived with my mama primarily. And so lived there for years until I was 15, and then I went to live with my mom here in Big Stone and went to Powell Valley.
Church a part of your life at any point in time there?
Off and on. My grandmother would send us up the hill to Sally's Chapel, right next to the apartments I grew up in. And we would go to vacation Bible school every once in a while. It wasn't always a yearly thing. Maybe like 4 or 5 times we went.
You guys have good memories, bad memories?
Oh, it was a fun time. I liked going. I do remember at one point where they had taught about Christ and taught about going to hell, if you did wrong and if you sinned. And I remember feeling, I was like, I don't want to go to hell.
Right.
Nobody wants to go to hell. But I remember I want to say maybe 12, I'd say about 12, that's when I first experienced that. And then also when I got to middle school, I experienced that again. And then again, asked Jesus into my heart, which now I know that's, not the right way to go about things. But at the time, for the time, that's what was taught. You ask Jesus into your heart, you're not going to go to hell. It's like, well, I don't want to go to hell, so I'm just going to ask Jesus into my heart. I never really got into too much trouble. I wouldn't say I'm a good person, but then, I'm a fairly good person. So I just grew up thinking, yeah, I've got Jesus, I'm saved, but, still told lies and stuff like that. Now I'm as honest as can be. You ask me plainly and I'll tell you. And everybody knows me, knows that. And even the pastor knows that. Yeah.
So, now you mentioned moving to Big Stone Gap. Was that a tough move, or was that a big transition for you guys?
Well, it was a tough transition for me. It was only me. My brother stayed with my dad and my grandmother. I'm the one that made the choice to go live with my mom. It was a bit of a transition because it wasn't too long after that I didn't really see my dad anymore or my mom. Now, I've seen my dad since. It's not been very many times. My dad never sent a birthday card, Christmas, nothing. He really hasn't had much to do with me since I came to live with my mother. So that in itself was a little bit of a tough transition, going from, having him living next door and seeing him pretty much every day to not seeing him or hearing from him at all. So that had a lot of bearing and created a lot of frustration and anger that had lingered on, and probably went into, I wouldn't even say why I chose to live that way, but it's probably had some kind of underlying, what's the word? I can't even think of the word, drive, underlying drive to live the homosexual lifestyle. And I'll even say there's a lot out there, and I know there's jokes that are made like, men are so terrible, I'm just going to go live as a lesbian or something like that. A lot of times that actually is the truth, that women have experienced horrible men in their lives, and they're like, well, that's not what I want. And so they tend to swing the other way,
Sure.
Taking into their own hands how to fix and correct that and find what they need or want in life and out of someone else. And I don't think that wasn't all that was for me, because I remember being from a young age, like, kind of like thinking things. I'm like, this ain't right, but this is weird. I'm not used to this, but I never talked about it to anybody. And then when I was a teenager, kind of almost glued the pieces together, because I knew when I was a teenager there was more inclination towards women than there was men. I had never had a boyfriend, never even interested in guys, not through because elementary school kids like, I got a boyfriend, I got a girlfriend. Never even had that. And I remember my mom asking me plain out, I guess because she had been piecing some stuff together, if I was a homosexual, and I was just like, no, I'm not, because I knew from the way she asked, I was like, okay, this is not something I can talk about to even work through with her. And that's a lot of the reception with people in this area. It's like, okay, this can't be. That's not right. We're not going to talk about it. I'm not going to even deal with it. Well, I don't think that's the right way to be. I think if that's something that you think you're going to have to ask, then there's something there that needs to be talked about. But also, the children need to be made comfortable to be able to come to you with those things. So that way you can explain to them, why this isn't the right way to be. This possibly could be why these things are going on. These feelings are being had. But that wasn't the case for me. Now, there are some families that I have read. I do a lot of reading. That is the case. However, with that anymore, it's come to more being loving and trying to explain to them why not. Then now it's gone to, oh, well, I love you no matter who you love, no matter what you want to be, if you want to be an alien, if you want to be, and there's even articles out there of people just completely destroying their bodies because they don't feel like they're either gender. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I think the world's gone crazy, but I know it's sin basically in the world that's driving all of this. Right. Then I had no clue. Growing up, I had very minimal contact with those in a homosexual community. There was a lady that lived behind us. She was a lesbian. I knew she was, but I wasn't quite sure what that was growing up. And then there was also my aunt had a male friend. His I can't remember, Jr. And he was a homosexual, and I knew more so what that was, because you always hear the slurs and stuff like that. So I knew what that was and what that entailed. But as far as like the lifestyle, I had no clue about any of that. And so growing up, I couldn't ask questions. Because probably nobody would have answered them, or they would have just brushed it off and be like, no, you don't need to worry about that. And so I was pretty much left to myself to kind of piece together things and figure things out. And so once I did, and it finally all came together when I was in the Navy, and that's the whole reason why I came out in the Navy. is because I knew that there would be more acceptance and more people that could talk to me about those things than would be more willing to hear in this area.
Now, you mentioned getting into the Navy, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So, as you're in high school, and I'm assuming you went to Powell Valley during this time, while you're at Powell Valley, is this something that you remotely had talked about with anybody in high school, whether it be adult or, teenagers as well?
Well, I do remember I had a dream one night, and I can't even remember basically the details, but I remembered what happened after I had talked to some friends who I, thought were friends, thought would just keep it amongst themselves. Well, it turns out one of them went and decided to run their mouth around the school. Well, after that happened, began getting bullied a little bit. It was more bullying through ostracization. Because when I first came to Powell, they were like, "Oh, cool, new kid, let's try to get to know you, let's talk to you and stuff." And then after that came out, then it's like nobody wanted anything to do with me. When I went to go change for gym class in the locker room, either they would all flock to the bathroom to change, or made it to the point where, and eventually it did come to the point where I would just go to the bathroom and change. Because at some point, apparently my presence had made them so uncomfortable because of that. I had never acted upon it, even said anything remotely to anybody like that, and toward those inclinations, those feelings. But because they thought that at some point I could, or that I was probably oogling at them or something like that, that they decided, no, we're not going to do this. So it got to the point I would go into the bathroom stall and change out for gym. So, yeah, it wasn't very receptive there.
Do you think that's why you chose the Navy? Is that something that you thought, well, I just got to get out of here?
Or no.
Is it more, I really want to be in the military, and I just so happen to live this lifestyle?
I have always wanted to be in the military.
Okay.
My grandfather fought in World War II. My father fought in Desert Storm. And so from a young age, I remember looking at my dad's Navy cruise books, because he was in the Navy when I was born. I was born in Portsmouth Naval Hospital. So, and I remember telling him a little funny story. I remember telling him, looking him straight in the eyes, like, I'm going to go in the Navy when I'm older. And he goes, "No, you're not." And I remember when I got in the Navy, I said, "Yes, I did." Yeah.
Now, where were you stationed?
I was stationed in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. Okay. I lived in Norfolk primarily. It's about a 30-minute drive to Virginia Beach, so it wasn't that much of a hassle living in Norfolk. I was in Airedale. I worked on the aviation side. I did paperwork, kept logbooks for the aircraft and the parts on aircraft, and kept up the database with all the parts and stuff like that. It was a fun ride. I would do it all over again if they asked me to.
How many years were you in the Navy?
Nearly 8.
Okay. Did you ever travel around the world in, or is it mainly stationed?
I did. I got to travel some. I got to go to Ireland. Stayed overnight twice in Ireland. I've been to Italy. I've been to Sicily. We stopped and got gas in Germany once. Let's see, Greece. I got to go to Crete overnight there for one night. Let's see, I'm trying to think of.
So a lot of Mediterranean, East Atlantic travel.
Yeah, and then and that was on my way to and from going to Iraq. I was in Iraq for 4 months. It was toward the end when they were going toward Operation New Dawn out of Iraqi freedom.
And that year would have been
2010, 2011.
Okay.
It was actually the end of 2010. I think it was like December to November to the beginning of March, I think. Because I think I was home for my birthday.
Okay.
In 2011. And then at the end of 2011, I went December and January to Kuwait for 2 months. So.
Now, you mentioned you had basically identified as a homosexual to some people in high school. Again, this is not something that you were just out there extremely open about. Why come out in the Navy?
It was more acceptable. Okay. There were people from all kinds of different backgrounds, and it wasn't until I knew that they would be okay with it. And I said, and that's when I started actually putting the pieces together as to, okay, this is what it is. It's not because I just find men icky. I was a homosexual, and I knew that they were more accepting, having talked to them, built relationships with them, and they were fine with it. They would even go out to the gay clubs with me. and stuff like that. So
any negative response from fellow soldiers or officers?
No, none. As long as I got my job done and I did very well at my job, they didn't care.
Now, did you relay this back home to anybody?
My mom.
Okay.
My mom and my stepdad and
their
my dad and my
response
brother.
was?
My dad and my brother they accepted it. They were fine with it. They were cool. My brother's like, I always knew. I was like, well, thanks for telling me. And then my mom, she had a very different response when I told her. I had told her over, let's see, it was over New Year's break one year, and then I think, and I'd come home in between, but I hadn't, no, wait, how did that work out? I can't remember. I think it might have been the same trip. I spent like New Year's there and then came back home, something like that. I can't remember. And I remember her yelling at me and pointing to the Bible and says, you know what that book says and you know what's going to happen, and just being completely upset about it. And that was all that was said. And
did that break the relationship with you all, or did y'all continue to talk?
No, I love my mom. I still talk to her.
Right.
I mean, I help take care of her and do stuff for her. So it didn't break our relationship. It was just something that she didn't want to talk about, but at the same time, over time, came to be more accepting of. Because at one point, her and my stepdad did allow me and my girlfriend to come and stay a weekend with them in their home.
Now, I want to go back to the Navy really briefly, because there was an interesting part. We had corresponded before we recorded. Explain to our audience the idea of what's referred to as don't ask, don't tell in the military.
Okay, don't ask, don't tell. Let me see if I can find it here. I had it pulled up. World War II brought about a ban on homosexuals serving in the military. And from World War II all the way through the rest of the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, even up to the 90s when President Clinton was in office, there was a ban. And if it was found that you were a homosexual, or somebody had thought that you were homosexual and then pressed and investigated it further and found out you were, you would be kicked out, dishonorably discharged. And so what happened with that is there came a witch hunt. It could come from people who were wanting to promotions but weren't getting them, even though they probably were crappy at their jobs. And those who were getting the promotions, they found were homosexuals. Not all of them were. It's just the ones that were. They would just do a witch hunt and get rid of them and try to get that promotion from them. And not even that, if they didn't like you, they just try to get rid of you. So President Clinton's answer to that was don't ask, don't tell. And basically it got expanded to don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue, don't harass. So the don't ask part was they couldn't investigate you for it. They couldn't ask you about it. They couldn't pursue that line of questioning. And don't tell is like, you didn't have to tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. We're not going to ask questions, and you can serve your country. Well, then once it got expanded, people were starting to kind of pursue, probably in the background a little bit. And so you can't pursue these people even if you perceive that they're homosexuals. And then don't harass. Don't harass them because you think they are. That's not what we're here for. We're here to serve our country, serve a purpose, and defend our country. And that was the answer to it. So that way they could freely serve their country. There wouldn't be a complete ban on them. Even when they were found out to be homosexuals during this time, they would still be kicked out. That was still something that was happening. But then President Obama came into office. And not long after that, and I remember being in Iraq, when he signed the legislation into law that lifted the don't ask, don't tell policy and lifted the ban on homosexuals in the military. And I remember sitting there in Iraq just breathing a sigh of relief. It's like, man, now I can really be open. I don't have to worry about my job being taken from me because somebody might not want me there, or has a problem with it, or somehow it's creating an issue in their life, even though I've not done anything to create that issue. Just me being me has created that issue for them. And so it was like a big, giant sigh of relief for the homosexual community in the military. that now we can serve openly. Now we can be truly ourselves and not have to fear if we're going to have a job or not.
So with you now basically being very open about your lifestyle and talking to your family, certainly the military really doesn't have any say over this now. You mentioned you come home, you do have a relationship with another lady, and we had talked about this earlier. That somehow went really south. What happened there?
It went south really quick. It was a long-distance relationship, and as those in the homosexual community will tell you, it's basically the majority of a lesbian's relationships are going to be long-distance. But some things changed. She changed a lot. I think she had some things, some issues she needed herself to take care of that I didn't see being in the long-distance relationship, but then being there with her physically, I saw. And she didn't like that I had got there. Basically, I must have been in her way of trying to get back with her ex-husband, even though she didn't even tell me that's what she wanted to do. I found out through the grapevine when we had went to stay at my mom's. She had 2 teenage daughters that one of them had talked to my mom and told her some things that I didn't find out until after we had broken up. And basically, she was seeing her ex-husband behind my back, and I don't know where her thought process was or what happened, but I know things happened. It was a very terrible breakup, and at the same time, my uncle was in hospital struggling. He had a double bypass surgery, triple bypass surgery. I can't remember which one it was, and he had come home, he was fine, and then something happened that he ended up back in the hospital. He coded once they brought him back. Well, then he coded again, but it was a little too late when they brought him back. His brain had already suffered oxygen deprivation to a certain degree, and then he was basically brain dead, but it just lingered on for, I would say, about months, 2 months. I can't remember how long it was, but I remember October 19th being the day that I was moving my thing. I took my cousin with me with the U-Haul to move my things out of her apartment, and at the same time while I was moving them out, I got the phone call that he had passed away. And I had to basically sit down, stop what I was doing, and call my mother to let her know her brother had passed away. And so that was a pretty difficult time. But during that time, because I would come up and visit, and I was starting to go to school down there, and oh gosh, I had mentioned Brevard. That's what it was, Brevard. It's a very lovely university, very small, tiny community in North Carolina, and it's 3 hours away. And then for some reason I had noticed, and I think really this is when God really was dealing with me, and I didn't realize it at the time, because all I wanted to listen to when I was driving to and from school, or driving to and from back here and back there, was the message on Sirius XM. I hate talk radio. I hate the ads, so I get Sirius XM, and that's all I would listen to. All I would listen to. Like, I would listen to some other stuff, but and piecing it all together, that has to be the spark where God was dealing with me at that time. And then I started coming back to church. I remember.
Now, where were you going to church at during this time?
Here.
Okay, so
I was coming here
Gotcha.
On the weekend, on Sundays when I was back here visiting, and it was a Sunday in October. I can't even tell you the exact date. And this year will make 10 years that I got saved.
Wow.
Truly saved.
Yeah. So during that time, you're moving back in, you got all these changes going on in your life. Like, what's the real area God just started pressing in on your life on?
Oh, gosh. I think it was just everything. From having to, gosh, I haven't even really thought about that one. But I'm going to guess just like pretty much all areas, because it was such I remember going to the altar and begging forgiveness of how I've lived, because innately I knew it was wrong, but I chose to live that way. And I remember even my mom asking me when I talked to her on the phone. I had went to go see my girlfriend. She was stationed in Jacksonville at the time. It's like a few years prior. Asking me, so is this how you want to live your life. And when you're asked that question, you know it's either a yes or no answer,
right.
which means it's a choice. It is a choice. And I said yes. And so I remember begging God to forgive me for doing the things I knew was wrong all along. And I think that just my personal life and is where he was pressing me the most. And it's been since, I know he's been working on me with a whole lot of things. The personal relationship I had with my mom, he's been pressing me about that lately, and it's so much better right now. Since finally the dam had broken, we had talked about some things that I had been holding on to since childhood, about the divorce and everything. And I believe it's been so much better now, because I remember God, just asking God, I was like, please, I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know what needs to be done, but please fix this. And that's what happened. We had a huge conversation. It was over text, so it wasn't face to face, because I was doing some stuff around the house and she was at her house. And it's been a whole lot better since. And a lot of it is, I'll have to say, I think some of that stuff may have been underlying drivers too. But I'm not quite sure. But I do remember God just pressed me about the things I knew I shouldn't have been doing that I had been doing.
Right.
And just begging for forgiveness on the altar that October Sunday.
So since this obviously amazing grace story, I mean, no doubt, I think, and I want to drop this line, I know Pastor Josh had said this to me once before when he was talking about, hey, you need to get Skye on to share her testimony. He gave a great sentence. He said, she's exactly what most people think can't happen.
Yes.
And I love the way he put that, because there is a sad reality to that many people have almost kind of marked off this community of people.
Yes.
And how was the reception, not to cut you off, but like, how was the reception once this new transformation takes place? You're saved, and God has covered you now, and you identify with Christ, not in the old sense anymore, so now you're this new person, but clearly we still live in the world.
Yeah.
And we have to go and get up and go to work and do our daily routines, but what was life like not too long after that for you?
It's like my eyes had just been opened. It's amazing how when you get saved, it can be from anything, and any sin that you're saved out, all sin that you're saved out of. But it's like a veil was split in two, and you finally see the world how it is. There's no gray. It's black and white. It's either sin or not sin. There's no in between, and it's just being wide-eyed and seeing a world with new eyes, not being like, oh, the world is my playground. Now you see it as, oh gosh, I need to stay away from that stuff. Sure. But from people, I haven't really talked that much to other people and let a whole lot of other people know what my background is, just because I don't know how they would receive that. But I won't lie. I wouldn't lie to them if they ask me. Right. And I know I'm probably going to get some questions after this podcast, and I don't know. I know there's been some stuff online from the blogs on Facebook, but everybody that I know loves me. I love everybody else too. It's a wonderful church family. I couldn't ask for a better church family, a better pastor and his family. They all treat me wonderful and treat me well. Even the handful that know what my past is, they still treat me well. Friends, they treat me fine. I don't talk to a lot of the older friends that I had. But I will share something interesting. I do keep a friendship with one of my friends from the Navy. Well, several of my friends. Because it's like a family too. Yeah. Even though you don't talk for forever, you still pick off where you left off, and you're just right back where you were. And I talked to her. I haven't talked to her recently. I need to give her a call. But she's a lesbian, well, bisexual. I'll say that. She goes back and forth, and she was going to marry a woman. And I told her, I said, I don't believe in that anymore. I can't come to your wedding. I'm sorry. And she goes, well, that's fine. And she still loved me. She didn't hold it against me or nothing like that. And I remember having a conversation a few months ago with her and talking about how I had come out of it, and she had saying she struggled with it. If you're still doing it, you're not really struggling. You're basically giving in every single time. And she said, I see it sticking with you. I see it was sticking with you. She said, I can't. I struggle with it. And I was like, wow, that's something kind of profound to say to somebody, that you see it sticking with them. Because obviously there's something there that you see or maybe have heard talking to you, that you know that, this is for real.
Yeah. Looking back on it now, have you had a lot of opportunity to witness to people since this has taken place?
Oh gosh. I've witnessed her. I've talked to her about it. I have a friend that I went to school with at Gate City.
Okay.
He's a homosexual, lives openly. I've witnessed to him several times, talked to him about it, and he basically just like, yeah, and just shuts it down, and then, well, I gotta go, and hangs up, and we leave the conversation there. We're still friends, we still talk, but as far as like talking to a whole lot of other people about it, I haven't talked to them about that part, but I do, tell them about Jesus. I don't think homosexuality is the only sin that's in the world. Everybody has an inclination toward one particular sin, or maybe a set of particular sins. But we've went door to door knocking, talking about Jesus, sharing the gospel, and talking about. Some people sit there and have a conversation. You give them bits and pieces how you relate to them and then witness to them through that. But there's not been a whole lot, as far as the homosexuality, there's not been too much there to witness. So,
what do you say to somebody right now living that lifestyle? For those that might be listening, like what would your best statement be to them?
My best statement? Oh gosh. That, you might be born toward that inclination, toward that specific sin, but it really is a choice whether you want to live that way or not. And the only answer to that is, if you're feeling a pull, that you feel that it's wrong, that what you're doing, there's something in there that's telling you, hey, this is not right, something needs to be fixed. And the only way to fix that is through Christ.
Right.
You can't fix that yourself. There's no way. You try to, you're going to mess it up every single time and end up right back where you were. The only answer to that is Christ. And come to Him for forgiveness. Come to Him who knows all your pain and suffering and sorrows. He knows everything you've gone through. He may not, he wasn't a homosexual, but He knows about that sin. He died for all sins. They were all poured on Him in God's wrath on the cross. So He understands what you're going through. And for those who are like, look at it like, well, I do that, I'm going to be alone the rest of my life. Look, Christ, He knows. He's the only Christ, the only Jesus. He only knew those burdens. He only knew what He had to do. He shared what He had to do, but He knows what it is to be alone in that struggle. But as humans down here, you're not alone. Christ was unique in what He had to go through, and that's how He knows the aloneness and the loneliness part of it. But at the same time, being humans, there are other people out here that are like me, that we will help you. We will talk to you.
Right.
Come to us, but first come to Christ.
That's really good. I want to follow up with another question. There is somewhat of a growing trend, and has been for a while, I'm not saying anything new here, but of those that might think that they can live in both worlds, that they could claim Christ and live in a homosexual lifestyle. What would you say to them?
I would say you can't be a fence sitter. You can't live in both worlds. Either Christ is the Lord of your life and you live for Him and denounce all your sinfulness, homosexuality included, or you're just rejecting Christ and you're making it void what he did.
That's good.
You can't be both. You can't live in sin and consider yourself a Christian. You're basically a hypocrite when you do that. And God hates hypocrites.
Yeah.
You just can't. You can't have your cake and eat it too, as they say. Either you're going to have your cake or you're going to give it up.
Did you ever try that? Was there ever a time where you thought, I can do both?
Well, when I thought I was saved initially, when I had given my heart to Jesus, I thought I was saved, living as a Christian. And again, I wasn't really saved. You're not really saved if you think you can live a homosexual lifestyle and be a Christian.
Right.
You're not. Because when you do get saved, you're going to start turning away from those things. You're going to start shunning them, putting them out of your life. Will you still have friends in that community? It's hard to tell. It depends on the person, if they want to be friends with you or not. A lot of them, they won't, because they don't want to hear the truth. Should you pray for them? Yes, if you're a newly saved Christian, even an old saved Christian. Pray for them, witness to them. But I wouldn't say witness to the point of hounding them, because that'll just drive them away. Don't harp on it. Don't try to beat it into them, because then that just drives them away and that shuts down all conversation. But you really can't. You can't be a fence sitter. You're either one or the other. You can't.
We've got a lot of situation going on right now in our country and around the world, but we certainly see it here in America, that the LGBTQ plus community is not only growing, but it's supported now and celebrated. Sadly, sometimes even within so-called churches. As a teacher and a guy who has a daughter as well, this is something we have to deal with as parents. What would you tell parents and even local churches of how to address this issue with children?
I would say use your best judgment, because it depends on each age as to how you explain it. Don't shy away from it. Explain it to them, but also explain it through the lens of the Bible.
Right.
Because that's how we should live our lives. Not according to the world, not according to our own opinion, but through God's Word. I think that's the best way to handle it, is through God's Word. I think they need to be taught how to interact with them. Because growing up, nobody was taught that. Nobody was taught how to interact with, those who are in the LGBT community. So because of that, well, either they weren't taught to, or they were taught to treat them harshly because they were different.
Yeah.
Those are two ways we don't want as Christians. Because A, you're not going to know how to talk to them about Jesus. You're not going to know how to witness to them. And B, how do you reach them? So I think it needs to be taught to them through a biblical lens, and also taught how to interact. Don't treat them harshly because they're different, because guess what? You might be having an inclination toward adultery or something. Sin is sin.
Right.
Just because they sin differently doesn't make them any worse than you. So I think those two things. Teach them how to interact with them, and teach them through the lens of the Bible, so that way they'll know how to witness and how to talk to them, have that conversation about Jesus with them, and treat them lovingly. Now, this is the part that gets really confused in this day and age. Loving someone in that community.
Yeah.
The world wants to see it as acceptance. You accept me and all of my sinfulness. You accept that I sin. You have pride that I sin. You celebrate it with me. And that's love. No. Love is telling you that you are wrong, that you're in sin. Love is telling you about Christ. Love is telling you what God says about sin and about your lifestyle that you're living, and that you need Christ to be saved. You can't be a good person to get to heaven, because guess what? The Bible says there are no good people.
Right.
There are no good hearts. Our hearts are continually sinful and wicked. And so, oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought.
I'll give you another question, and we can edit all that. That's fine.
Okay.
What would you say to the church community that might be struggling to see people who live in a homosexual lifestyle as redeemable? Because we mentioned before,
that is
and I want to go back to what Josh said, it's that idea that we think can't happen. We almost see this as the impossible.
That is a rough one. We have actually had one guy that left here that views homosexuals that way as well. And there's also a pastor who's online that it's just I would say despicable how he talks about that community and how irredeemable he thinks they are and that they should be killed. And I'm not even going to give his name. I don't think it would be the right thing to even publicize who he is, because it's just despicable how he treats others. As I said, they have an inclination toward one sin. You have an inclination toward hatred. It's the same. And it doesn't help the situation. Treat them lovingly. Do they have to take part in serving in a church? No, not if they're still in that lifestyle. But you need to view them as redeemable.
Sure.
Because if you can't view them as redeemable, how are you viewing yourself as redeemable?
Yeah.
Because you yourself were living in sin. God redeemed you, so what makes you think you're so much better than that person who's living a homosexual lifestyle that he can't redeem them?
And Paul tells us, and such were some of you. I think we forget that oftentimes. And like you said, we might be inclined to certain ones over others, but at the end of the day, all have sinned, come short of the glory of God, you, me, and everybody else. So I love your stance. I love your story. I love a good story of grace. I think people are going to be benefited from this. I want to ask you real quick, how can people get in touch with you? Because I will not be shocked if there are some moms, dads, and maybe even some individuals out there too that are hearing this and they're thinking, Skye, I've lived it, I am living it, and I need some help. How can they get in contact with you?
Well, they can get in contact with me through email. I have so many of them I have to pull it up to make sure which one I got here. They can get in contact me through the West End email, westendbsg@yahoo.com. I'm on Instagram. I think it's Born to Be Nerdy. I can't remember. I can give them they can, well, where's my Instagram? Come on now. Let's see here. I gotta go to my, well, no, that's not what I want. Born to Be Nerdy on Instagram.
You also have Facebook as well.
I do have Facebook. It's Skye, Skye, Waddle, Waddle. You can message me through there. Email, Instagram, Facebook, any of those methods are perfectly fine.
And you also do some writing as well, some blog posts. Tell everybody how they can get to view those.
You can view those in either one of two ways. You can go to our website, westendbsg.org. That's where they are published mainly. They can also read them on sermon audio. You'll have to type in West End Baptist Church.
Okay.
And they should be on there as well.
And so most of those are your writings lately?
Yes.
That you've come across? Okay.
Usually I do the blogs and Josh will do the podcast episodes.
Okay. Well, Skye, I appreciate you being on. I think, again, this is going to be a really helpful episode. I love your story. Love what God's done in your life. Keep it up, please. I think you're a big help. I think this church is better because you're here for them. And for those out there listening, again, please don't forget, you can find us on our YouTube channel and on Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on our Facebook group page, and head on over, if you'd like to our website. That's deeplyrootedpodcast.com. You'll find all the archived episodes, and you'll find our blog post and upcoming ministry schedule. And if you want to, you can email us as well. We can get you in contact with Skye or others that we've interviewed on here before. You can find us at drigw18@gmail.com. Again, one more time, drigw18@gmail.com. gaycity.com. So, Skye, we appreciate you being on, and proud to know that you're a Gay City fam alumni.
Go Blue!
There you go. So, guys, until next time, we love you. I hope you all have a great week in Jesus.